Welcome to the Fireplace Podcast, episode 17. First off, our disclaimer. We're amateur investors, and this content is intended to be us learning together rather than regulated financial advice. We urge you to check the ideas that you find here with other sources. We have a wiki website at thefireplace.info filled with articles for further reading, and a Facebook group, The Fireplace UK. Today's episode is titled Keeping It in the Family, and we've got our friend John here as our guest. Hello, John and Mike.
Hi there.
Hi there.
So what are we going to try and chew over? What's the goal of today?
Well, I think we've talked occasionally on our podcast about inheritance tax as something to kind of be mindful of. And I think today we want to go into a bit more detail. And John's done a lot of very good work in the subject and just chat around what differences you make, if any, to your portfolio and to your fire planning with an eye to inheritance tax.
So, John, you've previously presented this to local groups and things, so you've got a running order that you've put together that makes the most logical sense to try and present this complicated subject. We're going to try and take a backseat and let you steer things here.
Okay.
If that suits you.
Sounds good.
Fire away then. Off we go.
Okay, so I've put this together before to try and get the concepts across to people who are on the fire path, but don't necessarily know any of the details of fire planning. It might be quite early on in their life as well, so they've not really thought too much about inheritance planning. So it tries to keep it at a fairly introductory level. But the steps that you can take, suggest that you could take, are fairly straightforward. There's just a lot of them. But the main consideration is that most people on the fire path are saving a large DC pension pot and possibly large ISA and GIA as well. And I think for most people, once they get past the sequence risk zone, or if they just retire into a bull market, or they've done one more year a couple of times, they're going to have too much money or they're going to have a bigger pot than they need. And they'll get very rapidly past that sequence risk zone and they'll wonder what to do with it.
So when we say the sequence risk zone, we mean that someone's retired and they're starting to live off their pension pot. And for the first few years, they're a bit vulnerable if the market crashes, because they'll be then taking quite a lot of money out of their pot quite early on, and it might run out in the future. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think, that's going to build up quite quickly. I think anybody who's retired between 2010 and 2020 will have already seen their pot grow massively from what they intended to retire on, because of the way the market's gone over the last 16 years or so. I mean, I can't really say, I guess you can't really comment on the last 5 years yet, or the last 6 years, because, the market could crash tomorrow and we could be back to 2020 prices, that could happen. And so we can't, I guess, say we're fully past the sequence risk zone for those people. But for anybody before that, or anybody who worked a few years past FI, they're probably rolling in it, and they've probably got way too much from what they intended. They may well have inflated their lifestyle a little bit, contrary to their previous programming, but they probably still have too much money. And looking to the future, anybody with more than £500,000 each is going to have an inheritance tax bill. So it's quite likely that most fire people are going to have six-figure inheritance tax bills, or even more, come later life if they don't do something about it.
Right.
And of course, this got a lot worse when it was announced that pensions were going to become inside inheritance tax, because for the last 10, 11 years, people have been using pensions as an inheritance tax vehicle. So they've actually been overstuffing their pension and not withdrawing from their pension, because that would pass on inheritance tax free, which stops next year. So
right, that's a recent change, isn't it, to the law, and quite a big one.
Yeah, quite a big one. It's about 18 months ago now that was announced. Yeah.
And the change is that from next year, any money in your pension after you're 75 is now subject to inheritance tax.
No. Any money in your pension is subject to inheritance tax. It's subject to an income tax after age 75 as well by your beneficiaries.
Right.
So you get 40% inheritance tax on the entirety of your pension. And then you also, if you die after the age of 75, then your beneficiaries pay income tax when they take the money out. So if you're getting 60% of the amount potentially, and then you're paying another 20 or 40% income tax, so you're getting like 52% or 60 something percent of the taken away from you in tax, at that point.
So once you're in the inheritance tax zone with more than 500,000 passed on, if you've got 100,000, then you're going to pay 40% off the top of that, and then when you draw it, income tax off that. So
off the remaining 60%,
yeah. Wow. So that's quite a double whammy.
Yeah, I mean, you haven't paid tax on the way in, so it's effectively the same as ISA, but it feels worse for some reason. It feels mentally worse. And also the issue is you've got to liaise with every one of your pension providers and tell them exactly how much inheritance tax to pay from that pension. So it's a bit of a ball ache for the executors. Is they've got to work out the full estate, what proportion is subject to inheritance tax, and then look at each pension that you've got and say, right, that one's got 19% of the IHT and that one's got 7% of the IHT. So if you've got 4 or 5 pensions, that becomes a right nightmare.
Sounds like an argument for merging these quite early on and just streamline everything as much as you can.
1 or 2, yeah.
Do you have to pay proportionately, or can you do it all from the biggest pension?
No, you have to do it proportionally. Well, in the legislation I saw early on, I've not checked the latest version, but certainly in the earlier version, it was proportionally.
So every single pension might have to pay a little bit, right?
Yeah, and you have to do it proportional to the pension size on the day of death, so you have to have all of that as well. And if the market crashes afterwards, that's interesting. But yeah. So you've got so it's to stop you also from putting it all into a pension, or the worst pension, I guess, rather than paying it from your ISAs and your GIAs as well, which you would if you could. You'd pay it all from the pension, wouldn't you? Because then that gets rid of the income tax side of things.
Yeah.
Wow. I guess it depends how old you are, whether you try and do it one way or the other, but you can't do that. You've got to do it proportionally, as far as I know, as far as I'm aware. Okay, so I said you're ending up with either, if you die after 75, you're ending up with something like a 52% total tax bill when you take the inheritance tax and then you take 20% of the rest. Or if you're a higher rate taxpayer and you're a beneficiary, you're paying effectively 64% tax. So that's quite steep, yeah. So we want to try and avoid the double whammy if we can by doing fun things with our finances. Yeah, fun.
Right. And what sort of things can we do about it?
So there's the simplest one is that your tax-free lump sum is no longer tax-free once you're dead. So you want to take that out before age 75. Otherwise, you could have taken out tax-free, but your wife's now going to pay 20%, 40% income tax when they take it out. So you've got your potentially up to 268,000 of tax-free lump sum, depending on how big your pension is, and you can take that out.
Yeah, Andy and I touched on this in our last podcast, where we went through the mechanics of drawing money out of a defined contribution pension, either by FAD or UF+. And we talked about the tax-free amount. And yeah, I think in that one, we generally said it's good to take that out early on. And I think from what you're saying, there's another reason to take it out early on, which is that if you do die, then you effectively lose it. So it's one of those use it or lose it scenarios.
Yeah, the tax-free lump sum doesn't go away, but it becomes taxed. Yeah.
So if your strategy for this was, well, in my retirement years, use my ISA allowance each year to shunt my tax-free portion of the pension, then that ISA is still part of your estate.
Yes.
So that's still going to get the inheritance tax aspect, but it's then free of the income tax on it, because you're not withdrawing it from a pension.
Yeah, assuming you don't gift it.
It's a small win, but not a complete win.
Yeah, that means 20% of a lot of money potentially.
Yeah. So I think what we're saying in practical terms is, if you're a single person and you're retiring with a defined contribution pension, you should probably, at the very least, take out £20,000 of tax-free money from your pension each year and put it in your ISA.
Yeah, assuming you haven't already got a GA and then you're starting to do tax juggling. But yes, that's one of the things you can do, or you can gift it, of course.
Yeah,
I think gifting.
Yeah, and gifting is quite a big subject, but I think that's something we've talked about amongst ourselves already as quite a good way of reducing your inheritance tax risk. But the question then is, when's a good time to give money?
Yes, I think we've actually jumped ahead a bit here, and
Oh,
we've skipped some of the basics. I think we should go back a little bit
right.
Yep.
and lead up to these things, because we're jumping ahead. So the mindset and the maths of the optimization, rather than focusing on the other things that you need to do, which are probably more important in the first instance. And we also said 500,000 each. Actually, for quite a lot of people, that won't apply, because so many people now are not married, don't have kids, sorry. So you don't have the house allowance. So you only get the 325 general allowance, general IHT allowance. You don't get the 175,000 house allowance, because you're not passing it on to a child or a grandchild. So that's actually reducing it so that's a double whammy for, I guess, unmarried and childless couples, is that they can't pass on to their spouse, their non-married spouses, without inheritance tax, and also there's nowhere to put you lose 175,000 of your allowance as well.
Right.
So yeah, it's probably I tend to focus on couples because I'm writing for me primarily, and then for other people secondary. But yes, I'm aware there's a lot of childless couples and also unmarried couples out there, which will be affected disproportionately by this legislation.
On both of those, so yeah, I'm squarely in the targets here. Unmarried and living in a couple, unmarried, no kids. Fortunately, it means we've nobody pressing to pass it on to other than each other. So there is that.
Yeah, so there's a pressure to spend it or gift it to wherever you want to do with it. Yeah. I guess there's also a third whammy which we don't talk about, but there's also, if you've got like if you're looking after somebody like a disabled child or something, and when you die, you're going to pay all that inheritance tax that I previously wouldn't have to. So your dependent will have less money as well at that point, which is another thing I think is quite awkward or on I don't know what's the word I'm trying to think of. Yeah, but it's not good for the dependent. It's not good in those sorts of situations.
This is something we've come across with a few members of the group now, that they've got disabled children and they're looking to make provision, and we have said we want to try and learn enough to do some content about that in future, because that's possibly the situation where trusts make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll talk about. Well, we'll skim over trust at some point in this, but so the other number there we need to worry about is there's a 2 million limit per estate. So if you have got a house to pass on to a child or a grandchild, but your estate is bigger than 2 million, you start to lose that at a rate of £1 for every £2 over 2 million you have in your estate. And it's interesting because it's per estate. And generally what happens is when the first partner dies, everything goes to the other one. So when I die, everything goes to my wife. So there's zero estate for me, then my wife has a much bigger estate. Whereas if we could split it in some way, then I could have up to a 2 million estate and my wife could have up to a 2 million estate, and then we wouldn't go over that limit potentially. And therefore we'd be able to keep all of our 350 grand's worth of joint house allowance. So there's some weird stuff we can do around there as well. But yeah, obviously that's a fixed limit and it's been fixed for a long time, just like all the other limits now. They're fixed forever, as far as I can see. And so sooner or later, everybody's going to have an estate over £2 million, and it's going to go horrible.
Well, as the only southerner in the group, I think that £2 million limit, especially with property prices,
Yes,
is going to hit people in London pretty soon if it hasn't already.
Mm-hmm.
So the message here is don't live in the south. Is that right?
Well, it's interesting. The average house price is still below the two people's residence allowance. It's still below 350,000 on average across the country, but certainly not anywhere in the southeast and London. Yeah, so it's probably it's probably double that, isn't it? It's probably 700 grand is something like the average down south, I suspect, something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, most of those people, a lot of people might have houses as well. So if people have got big houses and not much in the way of not much in the way of investments or savings, and they're in a right bind because they've got to pay inheritance tax on something they haven't got any money for. So yeah. So yeah, we talked about the general allowances. These are all frozen until, actually, I said 2030 on originally, but I think they're now gone another year or so, haven't they? From what I remember last time, have they moved again? But yeah, certainly until 2030, they're all frozen, and they're probably never going to come down. Yeah, so it's probably not worth trying to go over numbers, particularly of examples on a pod. It's hard to do in audio format. But generally, if you're 50-50 split between pension and non-pension, then your inheritance tax will double come 2027, probably in that order.
And that 50-50 split that includes your house, does it?
Yes. So 50-50 excluding pensions. Yeah, so 50% excluding pensions, 50% pension, which I guess isn't that far off a lot of people. There'll be somewhere between a third and two-third pensions. I think a lot of people will be. So that's probably about average. So you can expect your IHT to double or go from zero. If you might be going from zero into a large six-figure number as soon as April 27 rolls around.
So we've described the problem and we're all horrified. What should we do about it then? What are the different actions we should take?
So there's a bunch of things you can do. There's things everybody should already be doing and probably aren't. And then there's things we can start to get ready for next year, although there's not much time now to do that. And then there's things we can do afterwards. And I think there's a whole big section on gifting as well. So I don't know whether we split that out or whether we keep that as part of the main thing. But obviously, everybody should have a will. So make sure you've got a clearly defined will. Really, everybody should have a financial power of attorney at the minimum as well, so that everybody can see what's going on. Everybody can look after you. You should also be updating your pension beneficiaries on your DC pension. So you should have checked those. You should have put them in when you took the scheme out, and people just leave them forever.
Yeah, going back to our previous one on the practicalities, whereabouts do you actually do your updating of pension beneficiaries?
It's usually on the pension platform itself. If it's a modern platform, you can go on and just fill it in.
Am I right in thinking that ceases to be relevant next April when it all falls into your estate anyway?
No.
Oh.
No, it's in your estate for inheritance tax only. It's not in your estate. It's a weird thing.
Oh gosh. So before it was down to the discretion of the pension trustees to just pass that on to whoever you'd said.
They still do that.
Of your estate. Yeah, and that's going to continue.
That's going to continue. So the pension will pass faster than probate, in theory, but obviously it can't pass before the inheritance tax been paid from the pension, or at least been set aside. So in the latest scheme, latest iteration I saw, they've actually included an allowance for you to tell the pension provider to not pass on more than 50% or something of the pension at this point, so that we've got the set aside for the IHT. Yeah, so it's all getting very complicated. And of course, the pension providers used to have responsibility for doing it, and somehow in the latest version they don't. It's now all back on the executors. So I don't know who has the most powers of persuasion over the government committees, but hey. Anyway, so yeah, you've got pension beneficiary, which you should put in. So this should be an expression of wish, not an expression of nomination, which some do. Some do direct nominations, which are in your estate and therefore part of probate. So be careful which one you filled in. Things like Nest, they actually offer them both on the same page, and you can see the differences. So I don't know whether that's going to change come next year, but I think from a mindset point of view, you probably still want to stick with the expression of wish, because we've got this problem that, people never look at the pensions. They forget to update them. They get divorced. They don't update their expression of wish. If it's an expression of wish, then the pension platform has discretion. If it's a direct nomination, they do not. It still goes to your ex. Yeah. So I think from a mindset point of view, we'll still keep those expressions of wishes going rather than direct nominations. And also, you need to do that every time something changes in your life. So if somebody dies in your family, you need to go and reconfirm it, even if it's exactly the same. Go and reconfirm it, and then there's no oh, what about this has happened, and it takes longer. Yeah. So you want to be checking those. I'll probably update them every year or two, just to make sure that the pension provider knows that it's up to date and there's nothing to go and check. So less likely they're going to do something discretionary you didn't intend. And also make sure that all your pension platforms actually offer beneficiary drawdown. So this is because a lot of the free ones don't seem to offer it right now. Certainly any platforms that don't offer drawdown, probably not offering beneficiary drawdown. And what that
So
means is when you die, the pension platform will pay out that your pension to your dependent or to your beneficiary as a lump sum, a taxable lump sum, if you're over 75.
So to put everyone's fears at rest, all of the big name full service platforms like Vanguard, Interactive Investor, they all support beneficiary drawdown, don't they?
Yes, yes. I'm still investigating whether the new free ones do or not, and it's sort of worrying me enough not to put my big pension pot on the free platforms right now. Yeah, so that's the issue. You want to have one that offers beneficiary drawdown so they can take it out slowly at basic rate tax or whatever it is they're taking it out of, rather than getting, a couple of 100,000 of pension taxable, most of which is going to be taxed at 45% or even a chunk at 60%, all that stuff. So
Yeah,
you want
it's
to avoid
pushing
that.
them into a higher rate because it's all coming out in 1 year.
Yeah, it all comes out in 1 year rather than spread over evenly. I mean, effectively, you could hand your grandchild, a fire fund that they could live on forever. It's possible, but less likely now that IHT's taking a big chunk out of it first. Because that was the sort of goal before. Is wait a minute, I can pass on a pension as a fire fund. So
Yeah.
when I die, my child is instantly fired. And they just need to take out 40 grand a year or whatever it is in real terms and sorted. But now, yeah, all gone away now. So yeah, as we discussed, you don't want to have 5 or 6 pension platforms. You want to have 1, 2, maybe 3 at a stretch to try and keep it manageable both for you and for your executors, because it's going to be a nightmare going to 3 different size platforms and saying you need to pay £50,360 and you need to pay 18,000. It's going to be horrible. It's going to be horrible to do that if there's lots of platforms. So I suggest the other thing that you do as well is maintain an ongoing IHT estimate. So every year, perhaps when you update your spreadsheet or whatever, you can get it to automatically in the background, perhaps, or you just create a little sheet that says, right, this is my current IHT estimate made up of this from ISAs, whatever.
I guess a lot of people in the fire world will already be tracking their net worth. So it's not a big extra calculation really to work out your IHT risk. It's basically you just adding in the value of your house, which you can look up on Zoopla, and you pop that in the numbers and tot it all up.
When you had probably 40 grand for your car and all your other stuff that you've got, and just bung that in there as some sort of estimate as well. But yeah, so house, car. So effectively, it's your fire dashboard showing ISAs, GIAs, pensions, and then it's another couple of lines for house and other stuff that you have to include as well.
Jewelry,
yeah, jewelry, gold, whatever it is,
Motorhomes if you're a Scottish politician.
Yeah, works of art.
Things. Yeah, and so also suggest that you list your pension beneficiaries somewhere and keep it alongside your will so that the executors know where things are and what's happening behind the scenes. So I've left a load of money to somebody in my will and thinking, wait a minute, what about this person? Well, look at the pension beneficiaries as well, because there might be a lot more in there. And they know who to then contact and all those sorts of things and where all the pensions are and everything. There's also a thing called a direct payment scheme for inheritance tax that some of the platforms use or are a member of. So this allows you as an executor to go and say, we need to pay £300,000 inheritance tax. Can you pay it from this GIA, please, before probate? Because otherwise you're going to have to find 300 grand or whatever it is from somewhere before probate's granted.
Yeah, so this is the payment that you make to the Inland Revenue before you get probate.
Yes.
Where they ask you for some of the inheritance tax up front, even if you don't know what the final amount will be. Is that right?
Yeah. I think. Well, I've not gone through the exact specifics of how closely you need to know it, but yeah, you need to tell them an estimate, and you need to pay the inheritance tax on the estimate or agree a payment plan. But I think the payment plans are like 10% interest rate or something, so it's not great. Yeah.
I've got 2 friends going through probate at the moment, actually, or recently gone through it, and yeah, it's a strange process because you get a bill from the Inland Revenue that says, we think your probate will be this much. We'd like you to pay this much inheritance tax, and then when you sort it all out and you've sold the house and everything, you tell us how different it was and pay us the difference.
So I can understand that's nice and easy to pay it from your ISA. The GIA, the question I have is, is that a disposal and there is capital gains? But am I right in thinking capital gains reset at death? So
That's right. So, yes.
This is after that.
Yeah. Although I guess the market just could be on an upward trajectory at that point, so it could be. I guess there might still be some gains.
This is the beneficiary paying it rather than the deceased person.
It's the executor paying it. Yeah. The executor tells the platform to pay it.
One thing that came up in the group was someone was saying that at least one of the platforms, I think it was Vanguard, will automatically sell your pension to cash as soon as you inform them that the owner of the pension has passed away.
Yes, that was something.
According to their website, they only do that with pension accounts. They don't do it with ISAs and GIAs.
But I guess with pension accounts, that's a precaution because they don't want a market crash to happen the following day, and then for you not to be able to pay the inheritance tax because there isn't enough left in the account.
Well, it was. That's been there for a while. That's nothing to do with inheritance tax because there's no inheritance tax on pensions at the moment. So I think that was just a weird decision they made.
But I guess it's more useful now because it shelters you from having as an executor, it shelters you from having someone who's passes away with a huge pension pot, and then the pension pot is valued on the day of their death. But then in the next week, the market collapses, and if you didn't sell it down to cash immediately, by the time you sell it, there might actually not be enough potentially to cover the inheritance tax bill.
That's correct, yeah.
But it's also time out of the market whilst all this is unravelled, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess that's why they're saying you can tell the pension to set aside 50%, because you think, well, 50% it can only ever be 40, but the market can crash, and therefore, yeah. So next on the list is what you could do. I don't know how much you trust your power of attorneys, but you could actually give them view access to your accounts. Quite a lot of platforms allow you to give other account holders view access to your accounts. So you could give them view access to your ISAs and your GIAs or your pensions, depending on the platform. I don't think Free Trade does it, but I think HL, Fidelity, Vanguard, they all give you view access. In fact, you even get trading access on HL, which was a bit weird, but yeah. So that's another thing you could do. You could give your power of attorneys view access so that when you die, they can see what the numbers are on the day you've died and have a good idea of what the real number's going to be, because they're likely to be your executors or talking to your executors about this stuff as well. Because presumably the view access will continue even after they're dead, although I'll not confirm that. So I'll say keep an annual IHT estimate and do that stuff.
What's next?
So things we could be thinking about doing is if you're a couple and you're legally married or partnershiped, and then you could consider adjusting your beneficiaries so that, should you, the 1% chance that you might die before April next year, then it can go to your kids AHT free before that point. So that's one potential possibility. So that's just a sort of a way out there suggestion. If your house is actually worth less than the allowance, the house allowance, so if you're a couple and your house is worth less than 350 grand, so probably anybody north of Watford, that's a possibility. Then you could buy a nicer house to make use of your full house allowance.
Oh, because that's use it or lose it, that particular allowance, yeah.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So it doesn't carry over to other things, it has to be used on the house. So if your house isn't big enough, make it big enough, And once it's big enough, you can actually sell it and say, I had a house worth that much once in my life, and that's fine, it's then preserved. So that's the other choice, of course. If you've got a big house, well, you could downsize when you retire and gift the difference to your dependents and get rid of some of that sort of money. That's one option as well. So we're coming into more of the, what am I comfortable doing area rather than this is what you should be doing sort of area. And of course, we can look at these other weird things, of course, like trusts. So whenever I've looked at trusts, they've been very complicated things, and they don't really save much tax over gifting, as far as I can tell. They seem to be mainly about control. It's about controlling who gets access and when. So it's this old worry, my daughter's married. what if she gets divorced before I die? But if I put it in trust, it's outside my estate now. In 7 years' time, it'll be gone. And then when I die, she gets it. So and only she gets it.
But
There's
you
all that sort of.
sacrifice a lot of flexibility there for whatever happens in the future to change the circumstances, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I just say don't be a control freak. You're going to lose 40% anyway. if you So if you're losing 50% because they got divorced, is it that much greater? I mean, try not to try and control your children's lives, because then I think that strains them more than anything. Less likely to be looking after you in old age and all that stuff. There's a separate thing called a life insurance in trust, which a lot of people do. Is that they pay for a life insurance policy that pays out when they die, but it doesn't pay out you, it pays out your beneficiaries. So it's not inside your estate. And some people use that to pay off the inheritance tax and things like that. But it needs to be in trust. Don't just take out life insurance. It needs to be a life insurance in trust so that it doesn't fall inside your estate.
That sounds like it might be quite expensive.
Yeah, I don't understand how it works, because obviously they must get back more than the average payout.
Yes.
Otherwise, it wouldn't. So I think it probably gets more expensive as you get older. Take one out at 50 and it was cheap. Take one out at 60 and run for 10 years, whatever it is. It must escalate. It must.
And that's also taking money away from your cruise fund, isn't it?
Yeah, obviously. So if you're paying into that, it's money out of your estate as well to pay for it. So yeah, it's all swings and roundabouts, and you need to do the maths. But these are things I haven't looked into too deeply, because I can cover things from IGA and ISA and stuff. Whereas if you couldn't, then you might want to look into these things.
Yeah, I think what was surprising when I talked to the friends who are going through probate is, in their cases, quite a lot of the accounts were part of the direct payment scheme, and were quite willing to pay the initial inheritance tax bill directly. So that was quite a relief for them. But obviously, you need to check what accounts you've got and whether they're part of the scheme.
Yes, yeah. And then there's two other weird ones, which are like the family investment company. So you set up a company where you're, like the controlling director, and then you have your children as sort of beneficiary directors and stuff like that. So they're quite expensive to set up. I've heard numbers between 15 and 25 grand to set up, but then they're fairly cheap to run. But again,
so there's never really an asset passed on. It's all owned by the company,
and then over time you
add children and grandchildren as directors, and it goes down the generations.
That's the general gist. I mean, I haven't gone too deeply into it. I did have a brief look at it and started to run the numbers. I'm thinking, this doesn't look like it saves me much more than gifting, and it's a lot of work to save me a tiny bit more than gifting. So why wouldn't I just gift? But yes, that's an option, especially if you've got a business that you can wrap into it. I don't know how, specialist advised area. But I think importantly, this one doesn't have to be through an IFA. It can be through accountants and stuff. So you just pay to set up pay a solicitor to set the structure up, and then it's done. So you can run it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I know people who do this kind of without having a specific family investment company, but they have a family business, and they end up having their children as directors of the business. So that way, it kind of automatically passes on to the children after they die without having any specific thing. But that's just kind of a way of passing on the family business to them.
I wonder, does that provide the protection from divorce that people seek? Because what's the status of the kids in that? If they're a director, is it deemed that they're an owner? It's about shareholdership, isn't it? I suppose.
Yes, I mean it's up to them what they do with their dividends and how they take money out and how they run the company effectively.
And over time, you could change the share classes and issue shares to the kids. And
I guess it all depends on how it was set up originally. So you need to get professional advice on this, legal advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. It seems like a complicated way to save a tiny bit of money over gifting. So as far as I can tell, but and then the other one is business property relief, if you've got the right sort of business that's entitled to that. But that's not my area. So things to look at if it applies to you, or if you're interested in delving into those more obscure, more complicated things. Okay, so that's sort of things you can do now. So
how are we doing for time, guys? Are we going to try and get through all this content in this episode, or do we need to be splitting it down?
I think we're probably only about halfway through, aren't we? Or two, maybe just over halfway through. So we probably want to split it, I suspect.
Yeah, I think maybe we should call it a day there, and then in the next one we can go into some of the more kind of approaches towards reducing inheritance, and also I can see more slides on going through drawdown and those kind of practical sides of it. But it's been really helpful so far, John. Thanks very much for your input. Andy,
Okay.
any more to say?
Well, just thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed it. There are more details on all these topics on our wiki site at thefireplace.info. We always appreciate comments and feedbacks on our Facebook group, which you can find at The Fireplace UK. And if you've enjoyed our content, please like and subscribe. That helps the algorithm show it to you and more people. And if you'd like to support our project, you can always make a donation to us via Buy Me a Coffee. Details are on the podcast description. And we'll see you next time when we pick up part 2 of this. Bye all.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye everyone.